very own Points of Light leader. So please welcome Points of Light President and CEO, Natalye Paquin.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, and welcome to St. Paul. Thank you to our co-hosts, Hands-On Twin Cities, for that warm welcome and for such a wonderful celebration of volunteerism and for 100 years of dedication to this community. To see, yes, 100 years, 100 years. To see the work you've done is amazing, and we are proud to be a part of it. I want to thank our presenting sponsor, UPS, and our lead sponsors, Bank of America, Disney, and Target. Your commitment to this annual experience allows us to connect and refuel, tapping into each other's energy to continue our work. Thank you to our content partner this year, the Minnesota Association for Volunteer Administration. And of course, thank you, Team Points of Light, which includes our board members and our amazing chair, Neil Bush. Without you, none of this is possible. And thank you all over at the River Center and here. Thank you all for being here. We applaud you for showing up to be together, for showing up in your communities, for showing others what's possible. So I want to start with a story about the power of multiplication. Imagine two streets, just a block apart from each other, nearly identical. There's a little litter, it's a little dirty, and the houses are a little run down. On the first block, someone stops on their walk to pick up trash. On the second block, nobody stops. On the first block, a neighbor sees the person who picked up the trash and is inspired. So that weekend, they plant flowers to make things look pretty. I love flowers. On the second block, someone tosses more trash to the ground. I mean, there's trash there already, right? On the first block, the flowers inspire a third neighbor to paint their house and fence, giving the neighborhood a freshened up look. But on the second block, someone tags the corner fence with graffiti where the trash piles up. When the city has a grant to invest, they see beautification on the first block, and this is the block that they invest in growth, while the second block becomes a haven for crime. So what's happening here? Multiplication. It's happening all the time. The question is in which direction? This theory has stuck with me since I first read The Tipping Point, How Little Things Can Make a Big Difference by Malcolm Gladwell. And we know little things can make a big difference. That very first action, the trash pickup, was the start of a movement, one that multiplies. And that very intentional decision can be life-changing for the person and the community. Being intentional changes everything. It did for Alicia White. Alicia lives in Jamaica, Queens, a borough of New York City, a community that she describes often as under-resourced and underdeveloped. Walking by a community park one day, she noticed piles of untouched garbage, no usable pedestrian pathways, and one person picking up trash. So she stopped and she asked her neighbor, who was cleaning, if she could help. Before she knew it, neighbors were asking her how they could help. And that's when Alicia realized that community revitalization was something she didn't have to wait for, that she could lead. She went on to launch Project Petals, a nonprofit that brings awareness to environmental issues and builds sustainable leadership. When she started, it was just picking up trash. Now, Alicia has a cause. And it's a privilege to say that in April, Points of Light honored Alicia with a Daily Point of Light Award because someone in her community nominated her, a demonstration that what we celebrate is a reflection of what we value. Now, it's easy to think of people like Alicia as the exception, but all it took was one intentional decision to stop and help for the multiplying effect to start. If you think about a person's actions, they can take away, they can divide or subtract. Think about graffiti. They can be net neutral and just walk past the trash. Or they can be additive as a volunteer to be a part of the cleanup. Or they can be a multiplier. Think about the people in your community and the volunteers you work with. If you inspire and equip a few of those individuals and turn them into multipliers, what would that do for your mission, for your neighborhood? But for someone to become a multiplier, it doesn't just happen by chance. There are two things we all have access to. It's time and intent. Oprah, Bill and Melinda Gates, they all have the same 24 hours and power of intention as you. Now, maybe we don't all have the same personal chef, a team of assistants, and a stylist to support us, but you know what? Alicia White didn't either. But she still understood the importance of time and the power of intent. So think of your 24 hours and how much of it you spend making intentional decisions. You might think it's a lot, but a study from UCLA shows that people spend 40% of their waking hours in mindless habits. They cite commuting, scrolling Instagram. Wait, I see some of you. Hopefully you're tweeting #pointsoflight19 right on cue, yes? But seriously, we know it takes one intentional minute like Alicia White to get off the sidelines and change your community and the world. Throughout the Points of Light conference, you're going to hear about people-powered change, about harnessing passion and turning it into action, about using your voice, but none of that can be done without intent. It reminds me of a quote: "Speech has power. Words do not fade. What starts as a sound ends in a deed." We want to encourage people to use their voice and take action. We realize people who do good or want to create change don't necessarily assign themselves traditional labels like volunteer. People do not like labels. According to the Corporation for National and Community Service, in the United States, 30% of people say that they volunteer, but 62% say that they help in other ways. That's why we're going to stop focusing solely on volunteering, and we are going to focus on the power of people. Take that in for a moment, because it's big news. This isn't about changing who we are at our core, but about leveraging emerging technologies and other things we already do to realize greater impact in our communities. If you think about it, if you think about a person's full potential, when they are volunteering, they are additive, which is very valuable. But every person has the potential to be a multiplier. We, here and at the River Center, we have unprecedented access to people, and that is our competitive advantage. People are the most valuable asset in our ecosystem. They bring their time, talents, and treasures. And if we are intentional about equipping people and mobilizing their full potential, we could get a lot more done and much faster. Here's an example. Let's say we have a person like Tracy who finishes their first year of national service and wants to stay engaged. Their interest lies in animal rights, so they volunteer with an animal rights organization. The organization they're committed to facilitates their service every Tuesday for 2 hours at a local shelter. Fantastic. This organization enables the volunteer to be a doer. And if there's one thing that we are known for in the volunteer sector, it is getting things done. But what if this organization removed the barriers and enabled the volunteer to clearly see how they could amplify their efforts seamlessly? What if this organization, using a variety of ways to engage, empowered them by publishing a list of products and services that were beneficial to the cause and directed them to local businesses where their economic power could be harnessed to support animal rights? Provided clear opportunities on social platforms to find content that they could share with their networks? Provided insights on candidates and referendums related to this issue? Made donating easier, and offered innovative employer partnerships to include in this volunteers' professional community? Maybe they start an enterprise like Alicia White. Now that person, who started solely as a volunteer, is now a multiplier, thrilled, committed, engaged, and that much more inspired. They are aligned not just with a doer organization, but with a true thought leader of their community, a real connector. And ladies and gentlemen, let's make this clear, we are thought leaders. And it's time we got credit for that and own our space as the experts we are. Yes. Now, at Points of Light, we see holistic engagement happening all the time, and we're excited to define this as an evolution that we are calling the Civic Century. This is a time where people believe, this is a time where we believe future generations will look back on an era of sustained, meaningful civic engagement where people are recognized as the driving force that transformed our world. But to do that, we must be intentional. People's free time is limited. We know that. So how are we going to be intentional about providing other opportunities for future engagement? To not only amplify their effect, but to maintain our relevance in our roles. Our communities are consumers of services, and they have choices. As a sector, we cannot afford to simply promote volunteering without recognizing other forms of engagement. There's a role for everyone to play in this, individuals, nonprofits, and businesses. Over the next few days, I'm challenging each and every one of you to think about how you can leverage the power of additional forms of engagement to accelerate our impact. And here's what this looks like in real life. Here's another example. Just last month, Points of Light launched a second cohort of an innovative partnership with Starbucks. It's called the Starbucks Foundation Service Fellows. The program allows Starbucks employees to work at a local nonprofit 20 hours per week. The fellows provide much-needed capacity to these organizations while gaining new skills and becoming civically engaged. Could Starbucks have written a check for or held an annual day of service? Absolutely, and they do. This is additive to the community, and we need those investments. But they also realize the potential of people as multipliers. Their employees are now multiplying their impact in their own communities. They show us the path forward in the Civic Century. They also show us how to ask and answer a new question for a new time. It's no longer sufficient for us to only ask, how do we get more people to volunteer? We must ask ourselves, how do we create a society where it is easy for a person to accelerate change? I know some of you are thinking, well, how do we get all of this done? To remain competitive and relevant, it goes back to time and intent. We don't have to do it all at once. But what can we do today? Critical to this is our ability to strengthen our case, my colleagues, nonprofits, for basic mission investment. To our corporate champions in the audience today, thank you for your support. You've heard me say this before, nonprofits need unrestricted general operating dollars. Yes. I knew that would get something, right? In addition, we ask you, our corporate friends, to consider sharing your best practices for social impact with the vendors and suppliers in your ecosystem, encouraging them to become multipliers. So in closing, here's why this is all so important. Close your eyes for a moment. Okay, they're not closed, right? Okay. Imagine a world where it is impossible for people to stand on the sidelines. And for those of you who close your eyes, you can open your eyes. What would it take? What would it look like if there were no sidelines, no barriers to entry for people to get involved, to lead and lend support to causes they care about? To expand the definition of what it means to volunteer, to follow in Alicia White's footsteps and become a multiplier. This is the world in the civic century where we see transformative change. This is the world where empathy defeats apathy. And we only get there because of you. Thank you.